and welcome to another We Are Developers Live. This is bizarre. We just started the show, and at that moment, my doorbell was ringing and get a delivery. So basically, I'm on the third floor, so I was waiting for the guy to be here on time. So basically, saying, I normally I give them a tip, but now I just go away. Like, oh, I'm on live right now. This is really bad. So
that's live for you, Chris.
Yeah, it's live for me. That's basically the weird thing about it. And you wait for the whole day, and I love these when they say like they deliver it between 10 and 5, and you're like, great, wonderful. So now I wait for it this here.
Yeah, before 59 that they arrive always. But there we go.
Yeah. It's good to get to know your neighbors because you keep like packages for them all the time, and it's basically a package delivery system. So not bad.
It's true.
So welcome again to We Are Developers Live. We're going to talk about a lot of links that we collected over the last few weeks that couldn't fit into the newsletter, or some of them will be in the next newsletters as well. Generally things that we wanted to talk about. And as it went so well the last few times, we got another guest coming this time. And surprisingly, it's another person from England that I had a lot of dealings with in the past. And it's David Letorey. So come up on stage and say hi.
Good day, everybody. Interesting that you have to run to the doorbell. We have these things now where you can drop packages off at the end of the road. So you can just go pick them up whenever you need, rather than having the doorbell interrupt you when you're in meetings.
Sure. You also have internet everywhere in the country, and you also have trains that run on time at times. So these things are not available in Germany anymore. So we don't do that any longer. But then again, I mean, I can go to any country without actually having to pay taxes on like things, importing them and these kind of things. So it's going to be for now. We'll see. It's really bizarre. I mean, I talked to Dan before that when I'm still using a lot of like English products, and I love a lot of English brands. So the other day I was basically in a drunken state ordering socks for me and my partner. And there's this great sock company in England, and Mr. Heron. And yeah, basically I clicked them together, and then I'm like 117 euros. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And clicked on them, and then the package came, and they asked me for basically to pay the duty on it. Because it's now outside of Europe, and they couldn't detect the comma in it, so they actually charged me for 11,370 euros rather than 113.70 euros. So it took me like 2 days on the telephone with them to that, like, no, I didn't buy socks for 11,000 euros. This is not what I normally do, no matter in what state I'm in. So it was really bizarre to see that that kind of thing. And it feels so weird to out of a sudden have to pay, well, out of a sudden, it's been a while, but it feels weird to be so close to England and have to pay import tax from that. Same with Norway and these kind of things. Yeah, but the good thing is that all the countries in the world are opening their borders and are not actually concentrating on themselves or lock other people out. So that's a great thing about it. And I want to point out that Dave is a good old friend of mine. This is not a MAGA hat. This is basically
there is a story around this hat. Jake used to run a video podcast when he worked at Google, and he invited Cassie on. And during the talk, at the end, there was some comments in the chat on YouTube, and this guy just said, "I don't come here for cutesy chit chat. I come here to learn tech." So Cassie released this hat that says "Time to learn tech time," and the money goes to help fund CodeBar, which is a great charity helping people to get into coding. So
excellent.
And those hats were black, and Cassie knows damn well that I only wear red hats, so she made one specially for me.
Not bad. Cool. So in terms of introduction, David Letorey is from London Web Standards and basically runs the State of the Browser event that we're going to talk about at the end of this as well. It used to be, well, let's put it for later. So we got a lot of stuff to go through again, and I thought we take you in and actually get your ideas on some of the bits that we want to talk about as well. So let me share my article that says like that AI is creating a generation of illiterate programmers, and that's not a arrogant stance, but the author actually says he started using Copilot and Cursor and all these things and he finds that he forgets basic things that he knew last week, and he doesn't even bother anymore because he just sees the machine doing it for him. I mean, we had the same argument when Google Maps came out, and people said like, "Oh, people are not going to be able to navigate their own city anymore without using a computer or a mobile phone. We're gonna lose basic knowledge that we should have." How do you feel about that? Like, I mean, I find the same, but every time I get code generated, I rewrite it because a lot of times it's just not the way I want it to. But there seems to be a whole generation of developers that just hope that everything is okay when the machine gives them the code and press the button to submit the app.
It's scary. The way I look at this is venture capitalists are out there at the moment giving funding to anything that's got the words or the phrase AI within it. And if you go back 2 years, 3 years ago, it was anything that had the words blockchain or crypto in it. And it's just a trend. And I honestly believe that at the moment, this is just a new fad that people are playing with. I could be totally wrong. But it does worry me that people think that they can become developers just by going to one of these tools and building a website. And what the reality is that they may start and build an app, a website or something from these tools and not actually understand what they're doing and what the implications of that are. So we're still going to need people understanding what's actually happening and what's being done. And the way the communities that I see, they're interested in what's going on, but they're not really jumping on this bandwagon and using this. Is what I'm seeing. But I looked at the article last night, and then I thought I'm going to find out a bit about this person that wrote this, and clicking on the about page. The first sentence says, "Nothing excites me more than the art of creation, especially on the World Wide Web," which I thought was really interesting. And then when you go to the next line, it says, "I discovered my passion for programming at a very young age of 13." And then this whole article is about using other tools to write the programming for him and really stealing his passion. It's right at the top there, Chris.
Yeah.
I just thought that was quite an interesting take.
Well, it was interesting the last few days. Ever since DeepSeek came out, every post on LinkedIn was about DeepSeek, and people became an instant expert. And it's just incredible how people get reliant on that. But the idea of like that the machine does it for you and you don't have to think about it, just to play like Elon Musk advocate right now, is basically nothing new. I mean, we had Stack Overflow, random copy and pasting, people without not knowing what they were doing for a long time. It's just now that the machine is basically doing the thing immediately for you. So the automatic copy and pasting is happening that way. But it would be interesting to see if there is a massive decline in like basic understanding, or if it's even necessary. I talked with Paul Kinlan about this from Google as well, and he said like there's lots of apps that I basically built that I throw away a month later. So why should I actually put effort in? And the machine could do that for us as well. So Dan, you've been a teacher, and I mean the idea of like teaching people something when the machine can do it directly for them feels like an uphill battle, doesn't it?
Yeah, do you know, I think that I was still teaching when ChatGPT came out, and I would say within a week, the mindset of students was changing. Almost immediately, things like essays became irrelevant because you just couldn't verify that they'd done the research and that any of the synthesis of information was even them. And I think to map it back onto this sort of generation of people that are doing it in the programming context, I think it's being presented to them now as a very different thing, because they're not seeing it as a programming based activity. It's more like that person that wrote the blog post, where it's more about the act of creation and programming is just the vehicle that gets them there. So they're not particularly interested in learning those whether it be syntax or just concepts, because they think, well, as long as I have the application that does what I want it to do, I'm building something rather than focusing on the code, which I think is an issue. Because if you then map that back onto learning anything else, you don't learn just to do that one thing. You learn so that you've got long-term knowledge that you can use in other domains. So I do think that we're kidding ourselves. We're just saying we can build things very quickly, but we're not acknowledging. And the second article there, Chris, Thoughts on a Month with Devin, really kind of hits on this point that yes, you can build things very quickly, but the article Thoughts on a Month with Devin says that it fails almost every test. I think it's something like 17 out of 20 or 13 out of 17 that it fails. It passes about 3 tests that it gives to it. But the average person is just going to say, yes, but look at this app that I've built. So they're not even going to look that deeply. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big thing when Devin came out and like, oh, we can generate AI programmers now. And Meta just announced that they're going to have lots of those. And like, I mean, we always thought like, okay, the AI revolution cannot replace developers. And it was the most idiotic thing to a degree, because if predictability like programming is much easier to replace as somebody who has to do like proper human tasks that are like creativity and things that basically people expect from a computer not to do. But yeah, that like 15% quality of like what Devin can do and what Devin actually does for you was an interesting insight in it as well. But yeah, many of them are being released at the moment. I mean, the register just went down it again. Like it just nailed just 15% of assigned tasks. Now it will be interesting to do that with real developers and see how many of them they nail. There's no one-on-one comparison, but also the question is like, is the task really necessary? I think in my career as a developer, the biggest skill that I found was like looking at a job and saying like, I don't need to do this because in 2 weeks' time it's going to be redundant anyways. So questioning the necessity of building it is something that a machine will never do, but humans will do. And it feels, from a product manager or a manager's point of view, it feels like a bad thing, but it actually is a good thing. I want my developers to question the work that I send to them, but machines won't do that. So yeah, we'll see how the Devins of this world will get out there as well. And it also is interesting to see when you see the specs of those agents, what people think my job as a developer is like. And most of the time, my job as a developer is not writing the code, but actually debugging and fixing the thing and trying it out in different environments. And that's something you just we're not just good at automating yet. But I found it interesting that Devin was like, okay, that's the end of the software market, and everybody keeps bashing on it at the same time. But then again, if we are so good at development, why are so many things out there broken? Like, code is not the thing. I want to go back to the when you said like the writing the code is not interesting for people because they're so close to the outcome of it. I think the web was the biggest revolution there. I loved programming, or I love programming for the web because it's so immediate. I write the code, I change the HTML around, and the page changes. I put something in my CSS and the look and feel changes. Like when I wrote assembly language or C or anything before that, I wrote some code, I went through a compilation phase, and then I looked at it and hoped it worked out. So the concept of code and product in the web is the same thing. Whereas like we, over the years now, we actually got into a world where we actually write CSS and JavaScript and then bundle it and then put it somewhere and then host it somewhere and then see it there. So do you think that is because that might be the thing where people are not as excited about learning programming anymore because that immediacy is gone and we're relying on a bunch of tools to do the job for us anyways?
I don't know. I find my day-to-day, I work writing content for MDN. And that's basically the whole of my job is I find this new feature, I research it, I try to understand what the spec says, and then I try to translate that into a language that developers can understand. And I think what I'm doing really is I'm writing content for AI to crawl and strip out and write content from. But It's not. I love writing code. I absolutely love it, and I think what we do in our industry is we're solving problems, and we're given tools to help solve those problems. And that the tools that I'm using is my knowledge of the language that I've been teaching myself. I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, which was all about the web winning overall in the end. And if you look at all of these things that have been happening in JavaScript and CSS recently, they had to replace things that people had over-engineered, like, I don't know, pop-up API. People had built a whole JavaScript libraries just to be able to create a pop-up on your screen, and now we can do it with one attribute on one element. So the web is winning, and it will continue to win, and I honestly believe that. So
I mean, the platform learns from these libraries as well. I remember when I worked on Edge, basically we saw a lot what jQuery had done, and that we put it into the JavaScript language itself, and the pop-up need and these kind of needs. I remember when HTML5, when we defined that one, and we just looked at class names and then came up with elements based on the class names that people used in other things. So that felt interesting as well. So, I mean, when it comes to that one, that last one here, are LLMs making Stack Overflow irrelevant? It makes me wonder, like, again, Dan, when you look something up, do you start with an LLM, or do you still do like a Google or Bing search or Kagi search or whatever you use?
The last couple of weeks, I've started doing a web search as well, only because I came across like an issue where the LLM was chronically hallucinating. It was just insisting it was right. I was going around in circles. It was giving me the same thing again and again. I was trying to adjust it, and it got to the point where I thought, just write it yourself, which is such a crazy idea now, to think I could actually just write it by hand. But in order to do that, I had to go and find the very specific niche, description of exactly what was happening that I'd come across and how people had solved it. And I found that if I'd just gone for one, to be honest, in that instance, I probably could have just gone to Stack Overflow and got there quicker, which I think is almost an unpopular or unsexy thing to say now. It's like we want to suggest that the LLMs can do everything. But yeah, I combine the two now. How about both of you, though? Do you sort of go for just web search or combine them, or what do you go for?
So I use community more than anything else. So I'm in quite a few Discord channels, and I will ask real people real questions about how did you go about solving this problem? How I'm trying to make this piece of JavaScript work. Can you have a look at it and help me with that? So I'm actually talking to real people about those, and I think community is absolute key to everything that I do. So communities that, I could list loads of them that I talk to all the time. And if I'm doing a search, I always start with searching MDN. Well, I don't search MDN because the search on MDN is horrendous. I search the Git repo, actually on my computer, which anybody could download that. But I search the content on MDN if I'm looking for a solution for something, and then I go and talk to real people rather than looking at a website.
As far as you know, they're real people.
Oh, well, sometimes they actually talk to me like you're doing right now. So
I think my favorite trick every single time when I wanted to have something from a community or just a code answer is show a wrong result and ask people to fix it rather than just asking how it's done, because that way you get much faster answers, because people love telling other people that they're wrong.
It depends on the community you're talking to as well.
No, I just mean the open Stack Overflow. Like that when I had something on Stack Overflow, I was just like, oh, I'm doing it this way. What do you think? And then I got the answer how to make it work that way. It was much faster than going in circles and like people asking me. When I work with the docs team of Edge and Chromium, basically, my favorite thing that people told me that a lot of people don't actually know is that the docs are normally the last resort. Like you tried everything else and then you go to the docs. That's what our numbers said, basically. And so basically the introductory things of the docs were not that important, but actually press this button to do this and find the thing here to do that was actually why people came to the docs in the last place. So it feels like the inspirational things that we do with blogging, that we do with videos, that we do with others are great to have, but they're not a place in the official docs. And that made me nervous, but it was interesting to get that insight.
Just over nearly 2 years ago, I wrote the documentation for CSS nesting, and there was something that just was not working. The specification said one thing, and what my testing was doing was something totally different. And what I ended up doing was going to find out who wrote the specification and then just directly emailing them and saying, Adam, why is this not working the way it says? And it turns out that the specification was actually wrong, and what I was doing was right. But I wouldn't have known that without actually talking to the person that actually wrote it.
There are some fun bits in specifications. I think my favorite was the media specification for HTML5 video, when there is a method called an event called can play through, and one of the return values is maybe. And it fascinated me that this is a specification. And you're like, why would I call this if I get a random answer? I don't want the machine to be coy with me. I want it to say yes or no. But yeah, it's oftentimes the specification and the way. Back in the days, we had the specs first, and then the browsers implemented things. Nowadays, we have a lot of stuff that's actually implemented in the browsers, and then we write the specification after we had trial runs, origin trials, like input from that. So it's incredibly important to try these nightlies, to try these like preview builds and see what's going on. Sadly enough, not enough people do it. So, but it's interesting. Yeah, Mark Thiele in the comments basically said that it would be great to get a list of all these discords that you were talking about. So, I mean, he can dive into his. He's the organizer of Beyond Tellerrand, also one of my favorite conferences ever. And he's basically, there's a lot of content that we could share. And I think Fediverse is the place to put it, or some GitHub repo, and I don't know. Maybe it would be interesting to see if I get a list afterwards. Yeah, so let's do. Sorry.
Certainly, I can share all of the discords that I'm in. One of them is Mark's, actually.
And Ian Lloyd is doing a wavy at Davey. He's just a lovely guy, isn't he? This is like a who is who from like that talked on mailing lists in 2002 that we're having in the chat here at the moment. This is great. I really love it. So here's one thing that I wrote about that I feel very strongly about, which is I hate the term modern, and it drives me nuts that it actually works for SEO. You have like 50 modern JavaScript solutions to this problem, 20 modern frameworks to use right now, the modern way to, I don't know, build routers or something like that. And it's the most fleeting thing ever. It's just like to understand modern, you also have to look at the date. So my like basically digging thing is like, instead of saying modern, which implies better than the old, we should actually say current, and that way show its worth. It's not going to happen because modern works in like click-through things, but it just drives me crazy that when you find thousands of outdated resources on the web, all called modern.
My question on that is, how is current better? If I Google the current best way of building a web server, for example, and I find a post from 20 years ago that said the current way of doing this, well, how is that better?
It doesn't imply the modern better than the other one. Modern to me is like it implies that it's a new, better way of doing it. And oftentimes a modern solution like React, as you said earlier, is not necessarily better than the old one.
The thing that I associate with the term modern more than anything else is Art Deco, which is almost 100 years ago, but it's like 1920s, 1930s, all of these modern architects and modern buildings and Bauhaus and all of that, that was the modern design. And I associate modern as 1920s, 1930s. So that's just, but that's the way I was taught, the modern new way of thinking. And then post that, they had to come up with new ways of naming design, and because modern was no longer modern. So,
I mean,
Then
we're
there's
definitely in.
postmodern.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. We're definitely in the postmodern. This is, I mean, today, like this time in history is like the epitome of postmodern, right? Everything is a pastiche of something in the past. Truth and reality don't mean anything. You get what I mean? But then it's not as catchy, is it, as modern? I think modern's just one of those perfectly meaningless but sounds good marketing terms. You know, it's like we've talked about before, scalability, powerful, all these words that people just use with tech products, and it means absolutely nothing. It just looks nice.
Yeah, it's the same with the phrase futuristic. That was around in the 70s, and the futuristic was the 90s, and we've gone past that. It's like when I was a child, I went to the cinema to see a film called Back to the Future, and we're way past the future now. The future was 2015, and that's 10 years ago. So
you missed the 1920s. What was it like back? No, let's not. I think it's weird though, because if somebody tells me 30 years old, I think 1970s. I don't think 1990. You know, like this is really bad if you think about it. There's an interesting resource page on public speaking. I might add some stuff there as well. So that's actually really cute as well to get started. And there's like books, there's call for papers, and there's all kind of cool stuff there. So I will put some pull requests in there as well. And that's why I love that people just go on GitHub and build these things rather than just building a web page for it. This is just a repo where you can add to it.
It's I found that tied in really well with your post about modern, because when you referenced in your post about modern, date is key. It's really important that we look at what the date is of the post, and then looking at the resources in there. Some of the dates on some of those resources are quite old. Some of them was like 2007.
Well, that doesn't mean they're not bad. I mean, like the question is like what I mean, a 2007 talk might be different from a talk these days because like attention span went down, but it's still, there's a lot of things in there. But you're right. The other thing I found interesting was that I ditched the algorithm for RSS, and you should too. So basically, like, get rid of all the social media stuff and think about RSS. And what I found very fascinating is how complex it got in the end, how to set up your RSS feeds and do things. And I just use Feedly and put things in there. I mean, one of the things I really missed was Google Reader, because I think that was really amazing for RSS. But yeah, I gave up on social media. I have a blog post in the making where I basically say that my social media is write only. I don't even read anymore. I can't be arsed. It feels like the trying to find the gem in the news feeds that are actually generated by an algorithm for me is just too much hassle. Sorry, influencers. Sorry, content creators. But do you feel similar?
But again, that's where I use community. So these Discord channels is where people share things with me, and these people have got similar ideals and thoughts that I have. So that's where I get my content. I've got social media, but I end up I'm just looking through it, and so I don't use it as a tool like I used to do. I do use community.
It's interesting, though, how many RSS feeds that I collected over the years are dead now, or some of them are being sold, and out of a sudden, like a CSS blog is telling me about mail enhancement features and these kind of things. So it seems like there's a RSS jacking thing going on from SEO people or black hat SEO people as well now. So misleading icons, that's just one interesting thing to think about. Like when you're actually building websites, that you have buttons without any titles in your SVG or anything that is basically available to people who can't see the button, then it actually is a bad idea. And HTML Hell, I think, is a wonderful, wonderful blog with a great advent calendar that just focuses on HTML. So it's interesting. If you think about building just icon buttons, think about that, because it might be not as obvious to people for screen readers users, but also people who don't understand the icon. I remember when I worked on maps in China, having like a map as an icon didn't make any sense because there were no maps of China at that time. Like it was just you stopped and asked for directions. So we put like we then used a different icon that just basically was a place thing, and then it became understandable to people. So having a text next to an icon that is resizable, always a good idea in terms of accessibility. Now, Tailwind 4 is out. Dave, you're really excited about that, aren't you?
So what I am really excited about is there's the attribute the attributes selector in CSS.
Yeah.
Or the actual attribute function is becoming way more powerful, and you're going to be able to use that to replace utilities, which, for as far as I'm concerned, that's the only thing that Tailwind should be used for. Andy Bell has written quite a lot about using Tailwind just for generating utility classes. But now this new attribute function that's coming to CSS is going to allow us to just take those details straight from data attributes that we may put into HTML elements and making the web even better. So I have no interest in using JavaScript to build my CSS, and I have no interest in when I just same as you, Chris. When we started learning the web, you could right click and you could view source and you could understand how a website was made. Now, when you right click and you view source, you've got no idea how a website is made. It's just a div fest with random characters everywhere that has no semantic meaning. So,
and even worse, if you use the developer tools, then the divs are nested so much that you cannot even scroll in the source view. It's just that's one thing we tried to actually do in the developer tools for years, and we didn't know how to do. It's fascinating. Talking of HTML elements, I love this page that uses every single HTML element in one page to basically so you can see what these different things do. And it's kind of it's kind of confusing because if you think about it, input is one HTML element, but it could be like 50 different things depending on what attribute it has and what it becomes. I mean, so it has this range, but it only has the input, but not the upload input and these kind of things. But it's just incredible. Whenever you think about building another component, take a look at that and you can see how many things are actually built in. And I would love to say that they're fully accessible, but there are accessibility issues with the platform things as well. Yeah. But at least they're not actually your problem, but the platform should fix it for you.
Is there an element there, Chris, that or either of you really, I'd love to know that you go, this needs fixing, this could be completely rethought if it wasn't built in this way already? Because input to me is one that when we're thinking about semantic HTML and everything being as readable as possible, etc., in input you have to then go and check out the type, and it's always the confusing one. If you've got a form with different types of inputs, it's always the one that you're going to get caught on, and it's going to be a bit fiddly. Are there any elements there that you just say, yeah, if I had an ideal world, I'd get rid of that and I'd rename it like this, or I'd rethink it like this?
I'd get rid of divs if we possibly could.
Maybe that's too easy a question. Yeah.
There's so many points that link back to this list of links that we have. So going back to the AI, if a tool like Copilot is looking at loads of I don't know, he's probably looking at GitHub to find examples of code, and most of those examples of code are just divs and not semantic markup. We could end up being in a place where AI is generating so much code that it's then looking at its own code and it's just looking at divs everywhere with and then there's so going back to that previous post you talked about on HTML about accessibility and semantics. All of these things are linking together to say we should be using the web as the tool and using the tools that that do the right job. It's like many years ago, I used to be a cabinet maker, and I would never get a screwdriver and use it as a hammer. I would always use a hammer to hammer in nails. I would use a screwdriver to screw in screws. I wouldn't use them the wrong way, because what happens is you end up with a mess of broken things. So using the right tool for the right job is is my point that I'm trying to make here. And we have those in all of those elements. So using the correct HTML element gives you so much more. And one of the points in the post about accessibility that you just mentioned was about ARIA. And the first rule of ARIA is to not use ARIA, is to use the correct element that will give you all of that semantics and the accessibility baked in.
I found it interesting though. Like last time we had a guest here, and he just posted about the Stefan Judis, and he just posted about that he found out that a section without any title or without any area title is nothing. And I always thought the section is a landmark, but it is not at the moment. So it feels weird because in the spec it is.
I heard exactly the same point the other day. I was listening to Shop Talk podcast, and that's where I heard them talking about that. So, and I need to look into that. It sounds interesting. Maybe we should have a talk at Web Standards about this.
So Joaf Weiss from X-Chrome has a really good post about a web platform feature and what ways to actually do that and how the standards process work and stuff. So if you're ever confused about why browsers don't do something or how you can make browsers do something, that's a really good resource as well. Because it frustrated me to no end when I worked on browsers that people complain on Twitter instead of just filing one bug or basically asking something on GitHub where everything is available to you. So this is a really good overview of what you can do to make that happen.
There's a podcast that I listen to, and it's two Americans and they shout a lot, but they shout a lot every time. There's this new feature and it's really cool, but I wish they'd done this and I wish they'd done that. And the whole point of that article is to say, you have a say. If you don't want something to be named in a certain way, you can put forward your argument to say why it should be named a certain way, or how an attribute could be named, or how. So I think we work in an industry that is very, very different from every other industry. And everybody in the industry can have their say in how things go forward and how things are developed and what is developed. And that doesn't happen in most industries in the world.
I mean, going to conferences over the years, I remember when Pebble smartwatches became a thing and everybody had one and said like, oh, that's going to be the future of the thing. And then it died really quickly. But now last week, they released the source code on Google open source code, whatever it is. And the original maker actually says with Repebble that they're going to rebuild them. So if you want an platform, an e-paper smartwatch that you can hack because the source code is available, will be interesting to see. But I'm done with wearables. But at the same time, I guess it's interesting that something that open comes back. It's a bit like what was the other one that was reading RSS feeds out to the Navas tag, that rabbit that was moving his ears. That was another hardware thing that everybody had in like 2006, 2007 at the conferences. JavaScript temporal is coming, and that means we finally get rid of date and time issues. What do you think about that? Is it going to be taking the world by storm, or are we going to hack for another 5 years to make sure that every browser will do it differently?
So I've literally spent the past 2 weeks testing every single part of this API to make sure that it does what it says. So I've been working with the version that's in Firefox nightly. It's behind the flag, but and it's pretty cool. The reason this whole thing was developed is, and it's taken many, many years. It's like over 8 years. And we have a talk at London Web Standards in July about the temporal API, is because it's very, very difficult to work with dates. And Brian notes in his article that the date object in JavaScript was just copied straight out of Java. And then a couple of months later, Java updated their way of dealing with dates because it just wasn't working properly. And JavaScript hadn't done anything about it. But now we have this new API that allows you to look at dates. And it's also got part that an instance that you can add on to the end of a date object and turn it into a temporal object as well. So that's really cool. So you don't have to rebuild everything you've done with dates. You can just say, and now make it into a temporal object. So I am quite excited about this. It does make things very, very much easier. There are a number of different parts. So there is an object for now. So what is the date time now? There is an instance. So my birthday is on this date. And then there is a duration. Those are the main parts of that. So the duration is between this date and this date. And all of these different objects have got a compare. And that says, is this date before or after or equal to this date? So then you can do things with that. So if it is before, you can say, this is so many days since. Or if it is after, it is this many days until. And then there is built into it zoned date times that allow you to say, I was born at this date and this time, but if I was born in Germany, my time of birth would have been slightly different, because we can also, and that's really good for doing meeting plannings and things like that. So yesterday, I got a message from Chris that says, we're going to do this video. It's going to start at 11:30. And I'm sort of like, I have no idea what time that is. Whereas if this was built with the temporal object, with the zoned date time, then I could have known instantly my time in London was this. And it's this working with this API has taught me so much about dates. I had no idea that some countries have leap months.
Leap seconds, you can get it.
Yeah, it's blown my mind. And yeah. So yeah. I've learned so much about dates in the past couple of weeks, but
it's annoying that our Earth isn't straight, but it actually wobbles a bit, and that actually gives us a lot of time issues, that kind of stuff. So it feels very, very bizarre. And I mean, it was interesting because in the past we hacked date with the Intel object, so you can actually get a date and then run it through the Intel to get like and say like, give me that in New York time. So that seems to be like now together in that one new API rather than having to rely on two of them, because Intel is super slow. It's like, it's great for a lot of stuff, but it loads shitloads of data to actually become international. Then we have like Subaru cars could be executed remotely. So that was a big security thing right now. So Dave, you're a big number in the boy racer groups of London. So do you have a Subaru, or is it just another car that you've been pimping?
I don't have a Subaru. I've only ever driven one on my PlayStation in games from the late 90s, because Subarus were the thing in rally racing, and that's all I know. That's all I can tell you. But it's cool that these things have got a web interface. It's not cool that the developers are not making sure that these things are secure. Yeah,
I guess there is this obscurity thing that like the more complex a machine looks, the more people just expect everything to be secure. And when it comes to pen testing and hacking things, like cars are probably a really cool attack point right now, because there's so much just basically where people relied on it and say like, well, nobody's going to try that one out. And that's never a security idea, I think. But well, yeah,
it's really cool that these things exist. We've got a thing in London and the UK called Zipcar, and I've got an app on my phone, and I can control via the web to unlock somebody's car. And I'm hoping that those things are secure. It doesn't bother me because it's not my car. It's just a car that I'm borrowing. But there are other apps where you can loan out your car and have them controlled or you can leave the keys underneath the boot of the, or on the back of the wheel and things like that. But,
yeah, in Berlin we have one called Miles, and people have been scraping the E off, so it was Mills. And that was basically a big marketing problem for them. But they are really cool. And I love that you never know what car you get. Like it could be an Audi A6, or it could be a Polo, or it could be whatever. And when I get to the airport every first Wednesday of the month, I have to go to Vienna. So it's like a 7 o'clock in the morning flight, which is like 1 hour to get there from my place in Berlin. So I always get one of those cars rather than using public transport. And it's kind of fun to see all these different machines to try out. But yeah, the security aspect of it is like, it always feels weird to actually go out of the car and not have a key in your hand and just lock it with your mobile phone. It feels like not normal to me, but I might just be old.
I mean, it's the thing that, sorry, I don't mean to jump on that, David. I mean, it's the thing that makes me concerned, and we don't want to go into it, I know we don't have time, but all these dreams we've got of this just being what everybody has, you know, and we all have these smart cars and everything's driverless or whatever. And I always think, unless we can get security to the point where it's like 100% certain, and because if you were to have a hack happen with a certain model, that's then millions potentially of cars, or at least hundreds of thousands of cars that are hacked. So then the risk is huge. It's just something that makes me think, I don't know if we're ever really going to get to that point of like, you know, mass adoption. And I can see Mario in the chat saying, Chris, you are old. So thanks for that, Mario. But yeah, it's the thing that makes me think we might not have that adoption.
I think there was a film in the 1950s called The Cars That Ate Paris, where the cars took over the streets. And so I think that's exactly what you're describing. But yeah.
Well, there's also THX 1138, or what was it called? It was basically the movie that was directed by Stephen King, and he said in every interview that he will never ever direct movies again. And if you want to know why, watch that movie. And the soundtrack was AC/DC, but it was basically cars that were taken over by a meteor and then became sentient and forced people to pump gas into them and all kind of weird stuff. And all the machines started rebelling against people. It was a very, very strange movie. But yeah, it became cult because it was so bad at times. This is an interesting one by Dave Rupert, where he said, like, in most of his code, this is happening all the time, and he's getting annoyed about it. So he basically wants to get this less annoying. So he replaced it with a style sheet for his editor to make it just gray. And then he basically created a glyph and actually replaced it with that one right now. Now, I think the interesting thing about this one is, like, whenever I teach people JavaScript or taught people JavaScript, this was the most confusing thing to understand for people. It feels like the Nightmare Before Christmas. Like, what's this? What's this? What's this? Is about JavaScript development. So it's fun that people hack these kind of things, but wouldn't it make more sense to actually find ways around repetitive code like that? What's your idea of this? How often do you use it? Most of the time I use patterns, so I avoid it because I find it also it was hard to understand because it needed context to understand what this means at that time.
It's something that confuses me to this day. I still don't fully understand the context of this, because it has different contexts as well, doesn't it? I know that when you're using web components, there is a specific context of this. It is talking about the component that you're dealing with, but it's still over my head. So,
what about you, Dan? You do a lot of like web components work.
I really don't like it. It's exactly the same. It just doesn't mean a lot to me, and I have to sort of go and kind of look at other options, I guess, whenever I come across it. It's just something I avoid. It's just not something that's ever really sunk in. And I don't know if it is just, if we used a different word, it might make more sense, but I can't think of one that's kind of more self-explanatory for what it is you're supposedly doing than this, you know, what you're referring to. Yeah, it's never something I'm going to get on with or enjoy using.
So the other one I found very interesting was Google Gemini in your workspace by Jan Leonard. So basically Google Gemini is now rolled out for free, even if you want it or not, on all your Gmail and all your docs and everything. So here's a step-by-step how to get rid of it and what to turn off. There's also similar things for Windows and for Meta. yeah, I mean, I'm working with the Google Gemini team, so I will see what they think of that. But it feels like I just updated my Mac and everything has an AI assistant in it right now that I didn't want.
Yeah.
Is this fighting the Clippies of this world? Is this our future?
But Ethan posted yesterday how to disable that as well. Ethan Marco. So on every Apple device now has AI built in, except Dave Darns posted a reply saying, "My Apple device is so old they won't install it on there." So maybe there's an example of why we should use old devices.
I have a 2013 MacBook Air, and even Firefox doesn't upgrade on it any longer. So it feels like this. It's very fast becoming outdated these days. And yeah, but you feel like a lot of you think it's safer because none of this new stuff that gets hacked all the time is on it. But no, out computers on the web are a bad idea.
I have an iPad from 2009 that I use for testing. Does my website still work on this? We're using progressive enhancement.
Oh yeah, I mean,
as long as it still works, I'd test it on a next computer if I could get hold of one. But
can always fire up links on the command line and actually surf it with that one and see what that one looks like. Now let's do some stupid things. Derpify is something that I built a long time ago, but given the comments that I get a lot of stuff on my posts right now, it's basically just when you type something in, it turns it into derp. So you can actually say like, Dave is amazing. And it actually does upper and lowercase changes. And I also made it an NPM package. So in case you actually need to put ironic or like sarcastic comments out there, I got you sorted now with JavaScript. And it's a one-liner, I admit it, but it actually looks quite fun to actually try these things out. And I've been using it a lot because sarcasm doesn't come across in like normal writing, it seems.
Yeah. One of the things that annoys me most about the designers is their use of uppercase characters everywhere. I've been dyslexic since I was I was dyslexic since I was about 30 because it didn't exist when I was a child. That's what my English teacher told me. But and one thing that I've learned is that we learn to read words based upon the shape that they form. And as soon as you make a word into all capitals, you're making that word into a rectangle. And you've then got to start to look at each individual letter to be able to decipher what it is. I only say that because when you typed in Dave is amazing, it just made it all uppercase. And that was random. I know that. But it annoys me. I hate seeing rectangles.
It was very interesting because in the past, when you used uppercase in HTML, screen readers would actually just spell it out rather than read it out because they were expecting it to be an acronym. Later, NVDA, the newest version, doesn't do it anymore. But I still think it fascinates me when people type in uppercase rather than just using CSS to turn it into uppercase, even if you shouldn't use it. But then you could override it with a CSS, with your own style sheet. So, but when it was uppercase in CSS and you highlighted in the browser and copied it, it still copied it in mixed case. Yeah. So that's what I found really, really clever, that basically when you copy and paste something that is uppercase in CSS, you still get the other one, that you don't have to rewrite it. Because oftentimes when I collect things for the newsletter, I get like all uppercase headlines. And then I actually go to the terminal and actually to write a JavaScript to turn it into mixed case rather than just doing it by hand. But just don't do that. Just use CSS to convert things. I mean, there's at Code 100 at one time, I asked people to write a UC first, which is a PHP function that actually does uppercase the first letter of the word. CSS has that as well, but you shouldn't write it in JavaScript because CSS has it. Yeah. So it's very interesting. But yeah, that dyslexia thing was very interesting to hear because I have another friend of mine lined up who's got a startup together with the Spanish community, making sure about raising awareness about dyslexia and doing all kind of interesting things there. So that might be another show coming soon. There's a YouTube video about Satan explaining HTML using death metal, and that's exactly what it says on the in the tin. I found it on, of course, on Bruce Lawson's reading list. And if you're offended by HTML, death metal, or Satan, don't look at it. And but it's very, very funny. I found
It's
it
essential that you have the captions on, because the words are not legible or audible.
Yeah, I first thought it's Chris from Ex-Mozilla who does it, because he has a metal band, but no, it wasn't. It was some Japanese guy. I don't know, but it was very interesting. I love this one, the Say Goodbye to Outdated Footer Years Forever. And it's basically product of the day 46. It's called getfullyear.com. And all it does is returns the year. So you can put it in your footer. And it basically, they made this whole package and put it up on like Product Hunt, and basically told people that it's the most amazing thing ever. And it's very funny to see, because it just allows you to put that 2022 example card. And I admit I do that in PHP on my blog as well. So basically it updates it every year, so I don't have to do it by hand. But it was fun that people just released this, and there was a lot of discussion about it, and people did pull requests for it, and it's for Python and it's for Rust and everything. So it's fun to see what people do without actually doing anything useful.
The two ironic things about that post is, one, there is a message at the top saying, currently 2025 is just being displayed as 2024, and please don't email us about it because we know about it. And then if you look at the footer, the date is wrong.
I guess that is on purpose. It feels like, 2021 getfullyear.com.
They know what they're doing.
That is
so I thought you put that in there just to talk about irony more than anything else. It's just
what would I know about irony? I'm German. This is the same with sarcasm. By the way, also what I found interesting is that X is now on YouTube. So it's basically a 2-hour video of a cozy dumpster fire. So in case you want to brighten up your room or hotel room, that would be a fun thing to just show to people. And that's
a miniature though, right, as well, yeah? That is a miniature just on that. I watched it for way too long, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's scaled down. That's false perspective. Yeah, love it.
Somebody should build the dumpster fire rather than like doing AI generating it.
Yeah. The most watched program in the UK on Christmas Day on Netflix was just a fireplace.
Yeah.
And it had way more views than anything else. So it's like, why
not the King's Speech?
There's lots of stuff on Spotify as well. There's like fart sounds, whale singing, whatever, and it feels bizarre that they got more. It must be really depressing as a band that they get more plays than you do. But people are like, okay, I can't fall asleep. Other people have like white noise machines or something like that. So basically, I guess that's what the user numbers are there. Now we're done with the links, but now we have Dave for a reason here. So you're organizing 2 events. You just said the state of the browser. I said the state of the browser, and you said you're also doing the web standards in July, which is unfortunate because it's the same time as ours, so nobody will come to yours. But so what are the? State of the browser. Let's talk about later. So what is the London Web Standard event about? Because I only knew it as a meetup.
Yeah, it is a meetup. So that's exactly what it is. So we started London Web Standards in 2007 in a pub in Holborn in London. And it was all about trying to understand all of these new HTML elements that were being released at that time. So the video elements and things like that. And then it progressed. It became a regular meetup once a month. And that went on for years and years and years, and we brought them back last year after the bad times. So we had a meetup in July and one in November, and then we had one in January, and we're going to have PPK, but fog stopped him from getting to us, so we didn't get PPK, and I had to give a talk at the drop of a hat. So I dug out a talk that I'd given in 2018 and made sure that it was still relevant. And it was called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Progressive Web Apps. But it was basically a history lesson of where the web is and how the web continues to win, because we keep making it more relevant all of the time. We're learning from all of these packages that people are using. So we've got a meetup in a couple of weeks. Well, 3 weeks today, in fact. So, and hopefully PPK will be here at that time. And we also have Keith, who's supporting State of the Browser. He's coming to talk about the bits, new attributes that are being added to HTML to be able to make HTML be more interactive. So, like the pop-up API. I forgot what the word is. It begins with an I, but anyway. So we've got some meetups. But I went to a conference in Amsterdam in November called Performance Now. Really a great place. And I met some people from Bloomberg, and they are the people that have done loads and loads of work for the web platform. I had no idea that it was them that funded Grid for CSS. And they've also been working on funding Temporal being put into browsers. So we've got Jason Williams from Bloomberg coming to talk in July about Temporal API, because we think Temporal API will be in most browsers around that time natively rather than just behind flags. So, and it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah, it's interesting that these old publication places like Bloomberg, Nature, and those people do a lot of stuff for the web together with Igalia most of the time, not with the big tech companies. So again, this going back to that, like bring a feature to the web article, that also explains a few of those things where they're coming from. And I love it because they come from needs rather than just like they come from, oh, we have to put a new feature in our browser because the other ones don't have it. But they come from real needs from like public publishers to find things out. Now, State of the Browser was a very interesting one over the years. And I mean, London has these really cool meetups. There was the MF Boat event as well. And like where and there was the Beer JS, which is happening again, or the beer meetup where we don't drink beer and don't talk about the web.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was State of the Browser, and that was back into those days when we didn't have browser makers available online. They just didn't answer emails. There was no social media to access them the way we do now, and we basically always had a panel of like browser makers that were just doing questions and answers for people. And I was twice on there, once for Edge and once for Firefox. And I remember when we never get somebody from Apple in, and we always put an Apple on the table to have them as part of the panel as well. But you changed that structure, didn't you? Like it's not like about browsers anymore, but general web topics now.
We did. We changed it for a good reason. When we started, there was many different browser engines, effectively, and now there's not many, and it's so we could have got Chrome and Edge and Brave and Vivaldi and all of these to come and say, what's new in your browser? And it's all like, well, it's the same thing, isn't it? So what we do now is we invite people to come and talk about what can browsers do natively without what is the web capable of doing. So a couple of years ago we had a talk about the web audio API, and last year we had a talk on the web MIDI API, and Katie Fenn came and live coded Daft Punk with a load of MIDI synthesizers and drum machines, and it was fantastic. But we had talks about what can people do natively in the web. We always have talks about accessibility because it's absolutely key. And you would think the number of talks we've done about accessibility would finish that, but people don't learn for some reason. And what we're actually doing is we're talking to the converted. All of the people in our audience know this stuff already. But very interestingly, this year, there is a new browser engine coming. So we've got Andreas Kling coming to talk about why he's building a new engine from scratch. It's a browser called Ladybird. that they're hoping to release probably next year. So
Okay.
yeah, so that's what I'm very excited about, that to have a new browser engine. We'll see how that goes. So,
yeah, now with Opera gone and with Firefox not putting the dent into the browser market that it used to, it's an interesting thing to not have a monoculture that we have right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's lots of skins on top of browsers, but in essence, they're a different thing. I think Vivaldi is an interesting one because it actually has a different architecture than the other Chrome browsers as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically a different world right now where the browser is going in the background and basically being an environment you build in rather than just like a choice from users. And so it's good that it changed. So yeah, we will probably be there. I will do my best to be around for that one again. And if anything, it was always a great time coming to this event. With that, I think we are at the end of it because we're actually having another recording in 10 minutes with a few other people. So Dave, great to have you here. Thanks so much. If you want to go to State of the Browser, go to londonwebstandards.org. You find all the information there. And
or
you also can
stateofthebrowser.com even.
Yeah, that's another option. And you can meet him on Discord, and you can meet him on the Fediverse. And it was great having you again, and hopefully see you soon. And I wish you all the luck with like lots of tickets sold and lots of good speakers coming in. And if you need any help hosting stuff, we're always happy to put YouTube videos or videos up on our channels as well. Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
See you then. Bye-bye. And that was WeAreDevelopers Live. So we're actually over time, but hopefully it was interesting. We had lots of good comments on the chat, and we will have next week. We're going to have an interesting one because we're going to have a morning session, but then we're also going to have an evening session because somebody from NVIDIA is going to talk to us about what they're doing with Python. So if you're interested in that, same place, same channel. See you next Wednesday. And that's it from me and from Dan. See you soon.
Thank you.